Number 20. The Zodiac Killer's identity and the tools that could solve it. For over half a century, the Zodiac Killer has remained a puzzle at the center of both true crime obsession and unresolved grief. Active in Northern California during the late 1960s, he sent cryptic messages and taunting letters that promised to reveal his identity but never fully did. Despite years of investigation, thousands of tips, and endless speculation, the case has never reached a definitive resolution. The enduring absence of answers has only intensified the public's fascination. So what would it take to actually solve a case like this today? Advances in forensic science and data analysis now offer tools that previous generations didn't have, and similar methods have already cracked other notorious cold cases. One proven pathway is genetic genealogy, the same approach that led to the arrest of the Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo, in 2018. Investigators in that case uploaded DNA collected from old crime scenes into genealogy databases, traced partial matches to distant relatives, and carefully constructed family trees until they identified DeAngelo as the perpetrator. His capture transformed the field and showed that long-dormant evidence could suddenly become decisive with the right technology. For a case like the Zodiac, investigators would begin by revisiting preserved evidence, the letters, envelopes, and possibly items associated with the crime scenes. Although older techniques often dismiss degraded samples as unusable, modern fourth-generation DNA sequencing can work with fragments once thought too compromised. Even a trace of genetic material left on an envelope flap or a stamp could now be viable. From there, any usable profile could be compared against public genealogy databases, potentially leading to relatives and eventually a narrowed list of candidates. DNA wouldn't be the only tool. To supplement biological evidence, researchers could employ machine learning to analyze the Zodiac's notorious writings. Programs trained on vast databases of handwriting and linguistic patterns are now able to measure small stylistic quirks, spacing habits, punctuation, and even letter formation that might tie the Zodiac's ciphers to a known personal archive if documents from a viable suspect became available. While handwriting analysis alone would never close a case, paired with DNA results, it could strengthen the evidence chain in court. Though the Zodiac mystery remains officially unsolved, the framework for resolving it exists, and it has already been proven effective elsewhere. What holds the case back isn't the lack of forensic technology, but whether preserved evidence contains enough genetic markers to yield results. Experts stress that if such data survives, today's combination of sequencing power, genealogical mapping, and AI support could finally bring clarity where speculation has dominated for decades. This reliance on cutting-edge technology is not limited to crimes. Other mysteries that have frustrated the world for years are also meeting the same scientific persistence, in one case deep beneath the ocean, where advanced tools searched for answers once thought unreachable. Number 19. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 and the search that continues. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 in March 2014 became one of the most enduring aviation mysteries of the modern era. A Boeing 777 bound from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, carrying 239 people, vanished from radar in one of the most heavily monitored flight corridors on Earth. Families of passengers faced years of uncertainty, while theories spread across the globe, from suggestions of hijacking to speculation about deliberate sabotage. Partial debris, such as a flaperon discovered on Reunion Island, confirmed the aircraft had gone down in the Indian Ocean, but the main wreckage has never been located. The absence of a definitive crash site left both investigators and grieving families searching for answers. Over the past decade, search efforts have pushed oceanography to its cutting edge. Teams covered hundreds of thousands of square kilometers across the southern Indian Ocean, one of the least mapped and most challenging environments on the planet. Traditional methods of sonar towing revealed almost nothing, underscoring just how vast and hostile these waters remain. That frustration led to the use of technology designed to reach areas long considered inaccessible. By 2024, search strategies relied heavily on fleets of autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs. Unlike ships or tethered submersibles, AUVs can dive as deep as 6,000 meters and operate independently for extended missions. Outfitted with high-resolution side-scan sonar, multi-beam echo sounders, and magnetometry, these drones built detailed three-dimensional maps of the seafloor. With their ability to scan wide swaths systematically, they distinguished natural geological formations from potential man-made debris. Just as important as the hardware was the software guiding it. The enormous volumes of sonar data collected in these missions required extensive analysis, something no human team could manage in real time. Artificial intelligence and machine learning now examine sonar returns to identify anomalies, highlighting areas where scattered fragments could be hiding. In fact, similar methods have successfully identified long-lost shipwrecks, including WWII submarines and cargo vessels, in other remote ocean regions. If intact MH370 wreckage survives on the seabed, this blend of AI with deep-sea AUVs provides the strongest chance of locating it. Scientists have made other contributions through careful study of confirmed fragments. The Reunion Island flaperon and additional debris strongly suggest a high-impact crash rather than a controlled descent, contradicting theories of a soft landing. While these pieces narrowed possible flight patterns, they remain partial clues without the fuselage or black boxes. The frustration lies in knowing the technology to find them exists, yet the ocean's scale and cost of continuing the search remain barriers. The case of MH370 demonstrates how modern ocean science has evolved into a powerful ally for solving human tragedies. Even without a final answer, the pursuit of this aircraft proves how tools like autonomous mapping, sonar imaging, and AI-driven pattern recognition are redefining what is possible when revisiting long-standing, unsolved events. And sometimes, those very methods are applied not beneath the sea, but in frozen landscapes where natural forces left another mystery unexplained for decades. Number 18. The Dyatlov Pass Incident's Scientific Explanation. In February 1959, 9 young hikers embarked on a winter trek across Russia's Ural Mountains. All were experienced outdoorsmen and women, but when their campsite was discovered weeks later, investigators faced a grim scene that defied easy explanation. The tent had been ripped open from the inside. Bodies lay scattered across the snow at varying distances, some barely clothed despite the sub-zero temperatures, and autopsies revealed crushing injuries far beyond what typical accidents in the wilderness might produce. Some victims showed fractured skulls or chest trauma, while others died of exposure. With no clear cause of death, speculation flourished for decades, ranging from secret military trials to supernatural intervention. Early avalanche theories were dismissed because the campsite appeared too shallow for large slides, and the Urals were not known for violent avalanches. Yet one strong scientific explanation proposed in recent years reconsiders that assumption. Using advanced computer simulations, researchers reconstructed snowpack conditions on the slope where the group pitched their tent. Factoring in wind loading, subtle temperature shifts, and the cut the hikers made to level the ground, models showed the potential for a rare slab avalanche, a heavy sheet of compacted snow breaking loose without obvious warning. This theory is supported not just by models but also by controlled testing. Scientists recreated the pressures of a slab avalanche under lab conditions, using mannequins to study fracture patterns. The results aligned closely with the injuries documented in the Dyatlov autopsies, particularly rib fractures and blunt force trauma that resembled the weight of a collapsing snow block rather than assaults or falls. Combined with digital reconstructions of the slope, this provided a natural explanation for the scale of the hikers' wounds. Timing also plays a vital role in the avalanche hypothesis. Whether data from the night of the tragedy indicate that strong gusts were depositing unstable snow layers above the tent, creating the conditions for sudden release. If the slab broke loose while the hikers were asleep, the tent would have been struck without warning, forcing them to cut their way out and flee in confusion. Disoriented and poorly dressed against the cold, several succumbed to hypothermia as they attempted to find cover in the night, while others were fatally injured by the snow's impact. Though not every inconsistency in the Dyatlov mystery is neatly resolved, such as the lack of clothing on some victims, the slab avalanche hypothesis has become the most scientifically grounded account of the tragedy. Rather than pointing to conspiracies or paranormal causes, it frames the disaster as a convergence of weather, terrain, and human decision-making. The case stands as an example of how modern science recasts enduring puzzles, transforming decades of rumor into plausible context. And just as researchers have applied forensic tools to this incident, other famous mysteries have recently yielded to new evidence, bringing long-speculated stories closer to resolution. Number 17. The D.B. Cooper Case and the Promise of New Forensic Tools. On the night of November 24, 1971, a man who boarded a Northwest Orient flight in Portland under the name Dan Cooper changed aviation security forever. Midway through the short trip, he revealed what appeared to be a bomb in his briefcase, demanded $200,000 in cash, and insisted the crew supply him with parachutes. After the plane landed in Seattle and his demands were met, he released the passengers but ordered the crew to take off again under specific conditions: low altitude, reduced speed, and a route south. Somewhere above the dark forests of Washington state, he leapt into the storm with the money strapped to him. What happened next has never been verified. The case became legend. For decades, Cooper was portrayed as the outlaw who might have escaped the system, inspiring books, documentaries, and endless speculation. Searches across the rugged terrain yielded no body, no parachute, and little to go on apart from decayed cache discovered along the Columbia River in 1980. The real forensic evidence consisted of cigarette butts retrieved from Cooper's seat, but older DNA methods failed to yield viable results. With no clear suspect, the story only grew larger with time. Today, however, investigators possess tools that could have shifted this outcome. In the years leading up to 2025, forensic science underwent a quiet revolution. Ultrasensitive DNA recovery methods can now extract genetic material from fragments once considered unusable, stabilizing highly degraded samples. When coupled with forensic genealogy, the approach that cracked dozens of high-profile cold cases in recent years, including the Golden State Killer in 2018 and multiple 20th-century homicides reopened in 2024, these techniques allow investigators to move from trace DNA to full genetic profiles, then to family lineages and finally to names. Applied hypothetically to D.B. Cooper's cigarette butts, this technology might have given the case a clear resolution. A genetic profile could have been built, checked against public and genealogical databases, and pointed investigators toward living relatives. From there, detailed family trees often lead directly to a suspect, even decades later. Had such information surfaced, the narrative of the perfect outlaw might have been replaced by a more grounded account of a flawed crime and an ill-fated escape. Beyond DNA, similar cases have been revisited through supplementary evidence. Financial records, private family documents, or confession letters have corroborated genealogical findings elsewhere. The same might have held true here if archives tied Cooper to details never released to the public. Combined with the recovered ransom money, these layers of evidence would have reshaped how the case is remembered. Less myth, more science. Whether D.B. Cooper's identity will ever be pinned down remains uncertain. But the tools now in hand show how modern forensics can collapse decades of speculation into concrete answers. And when they are applied outside the world of crime, the technology often brings down other great legends, ones tied not to a single man in the night sky, but to entire regions burdened with myth. Number 16, the Bermuda Triangle phenomenon debunked. For decades, the stretch of ocean bounded by Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico stirred imaginations with claims of vanishing ships, lost aircraft, and rescues that never returned. Dubbed the Bermuda Triangle, it became shorthand for unexplained disappearances supposedly defying science. Popular accounts leaned on theories of alien abduction, time warps, or secret technology, all filling the gaps left by scarce evidence and tragic losses. What modern analysis shows is less otherworldly but no less dangerous. By integrating satellite data, Coast Guard reports, and historical weather records, researchers found that many of the triangle's most cited incidents coincided with sudden cyclonic storms. These systems can form with little warning in this corridor of the Atlantic, producing walls of wind and violent seas that overwhelm even sizable vessels. Before advanced forecasting tools, crews caught in the maelstrom stood little chance. Geology also plays a role. Hydrocaustic surveys of the seabed have identified deposits of methane hydrates, frozen gas trapped in sediments that occasionally erupt to the surface. When enough gas is released, water density drops dramatically, stripping ships of buoyancy and causing them to sink rapidly. To observers, a vessel might look as though it simply vanished, fueling accounts of impossible losses at sea. The aviation incidents often trace to navigation errors. The Bermuda Triangle sits in a region where magnetic anomalies can interfere with compasses. Before GPS stabilization, a small deviation could translate into miles off course. A pilot unaware of a misaligned heading might miscalculate fuel or fly into severe weather unexpectedly. Accounts that once sounded like supernatural disruptions now align with known quirks of navigation across vast, empty stretches of ocean. Then there are the waves themselves. This part of the Atlantic is one of several regions prone to rogue waves, sudden towering walls of water that can rise over 90 feet and hit without warning. Modern measurements confirm they are not legends but rare sea conditions that can overwhelm even large modern ships. Older vessels caught in such waves could disappear suddenly, then later be remembered as evidence of something uncanny. The final piece is perspective. When statisticians compared accident rates in the Triangle with other high-traffic zones worldwide, the numbers leveled out. Once adjusted for heavy maritime and air traffic, the Bermuda Triangle did not claim more lives than comparable stretches of ocean. It earned its reputation not from an excess of disasters, but from how those disasters were framed and retold. Taken together, these explanations have eroded the Triangle's place as a supernatural enigma. Natural forces, storms, geology, magnetic quirks, rogue seas, layer into risks that are real but hardly mystical. In that sense, the Triangle represents how evidence can narrow myth into fact. And this same process has begun to resolve cases once thought forever sealed in history. Number 15, Jack the Ripper DNA analysis results. Few mysteries have carried the same cultural weight as the Whitechapel murders of 1888. The figure known as Jack the Ripper terrorized East London with a series of brutal killings, leaving investigators scrambling for patterns and the public gripped by fear. In the years that followed, speculation ranged wildly, from local laborers to aristocrats, from doctors to royalty. With little reliable evidence, the case became a breeding ground for theories rather than a path to resolution. One piece of material evidence stood out over time: a shawl reportedly recovered near one of the murder sites. Forensic scientists have returned to this object repeatedly, seeking to extract genetic traces from its fibers. Early DNA testing in the 1990s and 2000s produced highly tentative results, but the material was too degraded to yield a trustworthy profile. Some experiments appeared to highlight leads, but many independent experts dismissed the findings as compromised by contamination or methodological flaws. Efforts stalled in a haze of partial data and public argument. In recent years, new DNA sequencing techniques reopened the possibility of generating more information from old evidence. With next-generation sequencing, researchers can now reassemble even-minute fragments of degraded DNA into broader genetic patterns. Applied to historical artifacts like the shawl, the technique can sometimes point toward broad lineages or hint at population origins. Yet forensic scientists remain cautious about how far such reconstructions should be pushed. Material preserved for more than a century carries immense risks of contamination, first from handling in Victorian times, then from decades of storage and display. These uncertainties mean that while newer methods have sparked new rounds of headlines, no result has reached the level of definitive proof. This caution reflects a larger trend in cold case forensics. While some mysteries, like the Golden State Killer in 2018, were solved through careful application of forensic genealogy to preserve crime scene evidence, many others remain stubbornly resistant. In 2024 alone, dozens of decades-old homicides were successfully reopened and closed through tiny traces of DNA matched to family trees across public genetic databases. Those successes, supported by strong chain-of-custody evidence, highlight the promise of modern tools. But the Jack the Ripper investigation demonstrates the limitations. Even the strongest laboratory methods cannot always overcome gaps in preservation, contamination, and record-keeping from another era. The enduring fascination with the Ripper case shows how scientific progress can keep even century-old mysteries in circulation, not as settled matters, but as tests of what tools might one day achieve. Researchers continue refining the science, hopeful that advances will clarify at least some of the uncertainties, but aware that not every historical question may yield to forensics. And while DNA pushes against the limits of degraded human evidence, another centuries-old mystery has tested different sciences entirely: language, symbolism, and cultural history, challenging experts for generations until technology finally revealed patterns hidden in plain sight. Number 14, the Voynich Manuscript and the Herculaneum Scrolls. For more than 6 centuries, the Voynich Manuscript has remained one of history's most famous literary riddles. Its looping script is unlike any recorded language, and its botanical drawings appear alien even to trained experts. Generations of researchers attempted to decode it, but with no consistent results, theories spiraled from sober scholarship to wild speculation about hoaxes or even otherworldly origins. To this day, no consensus has been reached, and its purpose remains unsolved. What has changed recently is not the Voynich itself, but the technology applied to similar challenges. In 2025, a major turning point came through the study of the Herculaneum scrolls, ancient papyri buried and carbonized by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE. These texts are too fragile to unroll physically. For centuries, they sat as charred lumps sealed away from view. Researchers combined X-ray computed tomography with advanced machine learning algorithms to look inside the layers without damaging them. Instead of scanning for ink in the visible spectrum, the AI was trained to detect subtle differences in the texture of carbon-based ink against equally carbonized papyrus. This breakthrough, known as part of the Vesuvius Challenge, revealed continuous lines of Greek text hidden deep inside rolls once thought beyond recovery. Scholars identified material tied to Epicurean philosophy, a remarkable recovery of primary sources that lay silent for nearly 2 millennia. It represented the first time technology had extracted coherent chapters of writing from scrolls that no human hand could safely open. What centuries of manual effort failed to access, algorithms achieved in weeks by amplifying microscopic patterns invisible to the human eye. The implications reach far beyond Herculaneum. The same principles, non-destructive imaging, layered pattern recognition, and large model linguistic mapping, have fueled renewed interest in unreadable artifacts worldwide. For the Voynich Manuscript, while no comparable breakthrough has yet occurred, the progress on the scrolls demonstrates the potential. If machine learning could distinguish ink on carbonized papyrus, there is optimism that a sufficiently robust model might one day untangle the strange syntax of Voynich script, linking it to obscure dialects or specialized technical traditions. Some researchers already suggest that portions of the manuscript's imagery may correspond to forgotten herbal practices, with patterns of plants recurring alongside references that resemble traditional remedies. But unlike the Herculaneum scrolls, where the payoffs are clear, progress here remains tentative. Voynich thus continues to embody the intrigue of an unsolved mystery, even as nearby fields show what might be possible with the next generation of digital forensics. Historians note that these advances are transforming more than texts. They are reshaping how forgotten knowledge re-enters the present. Each successful recovery removes legend from an object's aura and restores it as a document of ordinary human practice, from medicine and philosophy to daily craft. And in some cases, the same scientific persistence is being applied not to pages preserved in archives, but to physical mysteries that took root in some of the most remote corners of the earth. Number 13, Amelia Earhart's final resting place. In the summer of 1937, Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan vanished while attempting to complete a record-setting flight around the globe. Their last known position was near Howland Island in the Central Pacific, a small target that few pilots could reliably reach with the technology of the time. When their radio fell silent and no wreckage appeared, the world was left with little more than grief and speculation. Stories of capture, voluntary disappearance, and even elaborate government cover-ups turned what may have been a tragic accident into one of aviation's most enduring mysteries. Searches over the decades have returned fragments, strips of aluminum, radio logs, even reports of possible human remains, but nothing that could be conclusively tied to Earhart's Lockheed Electra. Despite millions of dollars invested over the years, the deep waters around Howland and the nearby Phoenix Islands presented one of the most formidable obstacles in aviation archaeology: true oceanic depth beyond the reliable reach of mid-20th century recovery tools. That equation has changed in recent years. Autonomous underwater vehicles can now operate at depths of over 5,000 meters, mapping swaths of the seafloor with sonar, magnetometry, and LiDAR. These machines work systematically in grids, generating high-resolution images of terrain once thought inaccessible. In 2024, one private research company announced a sonar return roughly matching the dimensions of a twin-engine aircraft near Nicumaroro, a site long considered a candidate for Earhart's final descent. The scan revealed an outline suggestive of fuselage and wing structure, though no confirmation could be made without closer inspection. Technology has opened other doors too. Engine blocks and other metallic components can sometimes be traced back to production batches through etched serial numbers. If artifacts from Earhart's Electra are eventually recovered, such identifiers would be the most reliable path to tying evidence to her aircraft. Similarly, anthropological methods now allow partial skeletal remains, if ever verified, to be assessed through DNA testing and cross-referenced with dental and photographic records.